And the 2020 season has come to an end. Our Kansas City Royals lost in the ALCS to the Los Angeles Angels, and as you can see on your screen right now, the Chicago Cubs then beat the Los Angeles Angels in 6 games. They won the series 4 games to 2. We already saw what happened on the AL side of things. We beat the Indians. Well, we beat the Blue Jays in the wild card game to get to the Indians, and then we swept the Indians, lost to the Angels, who swept the Yankees. On the National League side of things, the Giants won the wild card game over Colorado, moved on to face the Dodgers, who beat the Giants, and then on the other side of things, the Cubs swept the Phillies. Chicago beat Los Angeles in a Game 7, and then the Cubs went on to win the World Series. So the Cubs have another World Series under their belt, as they had both the NL MVP in Anthony Rizzo and then also the NL Cy Young winner in Jose Quintana on their team. But now let's move on to the off-season segment of this. We're not going to be going over everybody's stats because we already did that in the end-of-season recap video. If you guys want to go see how all my players did in the season, you can go back to that. I'll probably link it in the description and possibly even in the comments as well. But the first step of the off-season was the retirements. Former Royal Alex Gordon has called his career. He is no longer playing. He did not even play in 2020. Nobody signed him. He had a decent season with the Texas Rangers in 2019 when we traded him for Joe Palumbo and Michael De Leon, I think was the trade. Neither of those guys really done anything. It was more of just kind of a dump trade to get a space open at that left field position. And Alex Gordon is now retired. Matt Harvey also retired. We did not sign him at the end of the 2019 season. Nobody signed him for 2020, and he decided to call it quits. So Matt Harvey, his career is over as well as the 2018 National League MVP. If you guys remember, Ryan Zimmerman won the MVP in 2018 in this franchise. And he did not even play in 2020 despite hitting, I think, like 20-something home runs in 2019. Nobody signed him, and he ended up retiring. So Ryan Zimmerman, his career comes to an end as well. As far as who made the Hall of Fame, you've got Jose Reyes, somehow made the Hall of Fame, joining the ranks of all-time scumbags with guys like Ty Cobb. And then Robinson Cano also made the Hall of Fame. Moving on to the re-signs portion of the offseason, the first one we did, and probably, or definitely the most important one, was we brought back Chris Archer. You guys did not get to see him pitch at all because I traded for him. He got hurt, missed the rest of the season and the playoffs, but he's going to be back for 4 more years in Kansas City. We signed him to $55 million over 4 years, so Chris Archer could possibly end his career in Kansas City. And we've got him for 4 more years. He is a big part of our future in this rotation. Kelvin Herrera. The qualifying offer for him would have been $18.4 million. Definitely not offering him that. So instead, what we did was we signed him to a 2-year deal worth $10 million over those 2 years. So Kelvin Herrera, our fireballer, closer, is back in that spot. Marcus Semien, we did not re-sign because he wanted $8 million a year. I did not want to pay Marcus Semien that much, and he went and signed with the Toronto Blue Jays. Brad Brock, another guy we did not bring back, he walked into free agency, and he signed with the Baltimore Orioles. So obviously in real life he's with the Orioles. Then he signed with the Yankees and won a World Series with them in 2019. And then he came to us, and now he's going back to Baltimore. Josh Fields, another guy who's also going back to his original team. He is signed with the Houston Astros as we let him walk. Felix Hernandez is a guy we also did not re-sign. I don't know who we re-signed with. For all I know, he could still be in free agency at the start of the year. One of those guys, he's just going to sit there because he's old and nobody wants him for whatever reason. And he wants too much money, and he's not going to compromise because that's another thing that MLB The Show does not fix. Jurickson Profar, a guy who wants an absurd amount of money for what he did. He was a decent utility guy for us, and for whatever reason, he thinks he's worth $8 million a year. So Jurickson Profar, we let him walk. I did not see who he signed with. I'm sure I'll find that out sometime through the season. Maybe I'll include that in the April recap. Vince Falvey, he was re-signed for 4 years, $5.6 million over those 4, so a very cost-effective deal for Vince Falvey. He's our DH. He solidified that in our lineup. Pavin Smith, also 4 years, $7 million. He's our first baseman. He solidified that position. Foster Griffin has been signed for $1.4 million over 2 years. He did not have the best 2020 season, but I'm hoping that that experience in that 2020 season, now that he's got some time in the big leagues and then plus a full season in the major leagues, will help him, and he will possibly put up some decent numbers for us this year, because I'm hoping he's going to be a part of our rotation for years to come. Richard Rose is a guy who did not perform well for us in the major leagues, nor did he perform well for us in the minor leagues. He's a guy who's going to have to prove himself. He's going to be in AAA. I signed him to a 2-year deal because he's still very young. But Richard Rose, right now, it's looking like he's probably not an answer at second base. I was hoping he would be, but he is. Mark Leiter Jr. was also re-signed to 2 years, $1.3 million over those 2 years. He is 29 years old, so we'll have him for his 30 and 31-year-old seasons. He hasn't really gotten too much of an opportunity in the major leagues. It took him a while to work up through the minors in real life because he was like a 37th round pick or something like that. He went to New Jersey Institute of Technology, not a big baseball school, so it took him a while to really develop the minors. But now that he's here, he does have quite good ratings, so he's actually going to be in our rotation this year, which we'll get into a bit later on in the episode. Luis Cessa, also a guy I re-signed. He's just pretty much a depth starter at this point. He's probably, I'd say, the 6th, 7th, or maybe even 8th starter on our depth chart, so if someone gets hurt at the major league level, it'll be deciding between him, Donnie Fitzgerald, or Michael Winnicka to call up and take somebody's spot in the rotation. Cessa would obviously be the one with the most experience, while the others would be making their major league debuts. Nicky Lopez was a guy who I called up at the end of last year. Didn't really show anything that was too impressive. Obviously, he had that big double in the ALCS, but we could not close it out at the very end of the ALCS Game 6. But he's re-signed for $550,000 over a year. I doubt he's going to be a long-term option for us, but he's going to be in AAA. Maybreeze Valoria is a long-term option for us. He's signed for $5 million over 3 years. Poor offensive first half from him, great defensive. He's just great defensively all the time. There's never going to be a time where Maybreeze Valoria is going to have issues defensively, but he started off his first major league season not the greatest in the offensive categories in the first half, but in the second half, he really started to settle into his zone. He hit a lot more home runs, and I think he could very possibly be like a 20-plus home run guy who's going to be a great bat for us. Maybe not a middle-of-the-order great bat, but he's definitely going to be a serviceable bat at the catcher position for us. Jorge Soler is a guy who was brought back on arbitration. We did not offer him a contract, and he actually wants $8 million a year, and this is the last year of control. This 2021 upcoming season is the last year of control that I have him. So Jorge Soler is probably going to walk into free agency next year because I don't think I want to spend that much money on him. So next year in 2022, so that would be season 5 of this franchise, we could see a new guy take over at one of the corner outfield positions, depending on where I put Jorge Bonifacio. If he stays in left, moves to right, we'll see. There's definitely some moving around we can do at those positions, and we also have guys who are coming up, like Elir Hernandez, and then as I will get later on, you'll see we signed a couple guys as well. Travis Jankowski is a guy who I let walk into free agency. He was just a 4th outfielder. I didn't really need to bring him back. Jose Urena, also a guy we did not re-sign. And then Alberto Mondesi, the Ned Yost of Ned Yost players. He was not brought back. The guy can't hit at all. He can bunt and he can play defense. That's not what I'm looking for. That's not what I want on my ball club. This is not Ned Yost's ball club. So Alberto Mondesi, he was let walk and he's going to go sign with a different team. Now moving on to the free agency portion of the episode, we did a lot, and I mean a lot of one-year deals. We didn't really commit to quite a lot of, really anybody. We didn't really commit to anybody, just a lot of stopgaps at certain positions, guys on prove-it deals for us. The first one, probably the most major one, would be Matt Carpenter. We signed him to a $4.6 million deal for 1 year. He's been a guy, he's up there in years, I believe he's 35 now. He's had consistent 800 to 900 OPS seasons with the Cardinals, and then last year with the Philadelphia Phillies, he had a 943 OPS. And the guy's discipline and his OBP is always through the roof. So the plan for him is to be our leadoff guy and also third baseman against right-handed pitchers. And then you may be asking yourself, what about lefties? The guy can't hit lefties. Are you still going to play him leadoff and third base against lefties? I am not. Jeffrey Marte from the Los Angeles Angels, the team that beat us in the ALCS, is going to be our third baseman against left-handers. We signed him to a $1.5 million deal for 1 year. He had a down year in 2020. He had a .665 OPS with the Angels, but in 2019, he had a .788 OPS and he had 32 bombs for them, and then 2018, he had a .803 OPS. So he's going to be our starter against lefties at third base this year, and he could possibly take Carpenter's spot as the third baseman next year if he has a good year this year. So Marte could be our third baseman for a couple of years, especially since Hunter Dozier doesn't really have it, and then Miguel Andujar hasn't really shown that he belongs there. We also replaced Jurickson Profar's utility spot with a guy named Marwin Gonzalez. We signed him to a $2.5 million deal for this next season. He had a down year in 2020 as well, .667 OPS, but he's had good years in 2018 and 2019 with around an .800 OPS both those seasons. He'll be the utility role for us. He's just taken over Profar's job. Ryan Schimpf is going to be our second baseman. Ryan Schimpf is pretty much Larry Decker, but older and more experienced. So Schimpf, $1.9 million over 1 year. Once again, another prove-it guy. He has not had a chance to start in his major league career. He's gotten a decent amount of time with San Diego in one season, but he really hasn't gotten much time to really start for us. I'm planning on having him as be our second baseman all year long, see how many home runs he can crank out. Basically, the plan with him is to possibly have him for 1 or 2 years, and then eventually Larry Decker, once he gets his discipline up more, will take over at second base, and we'll just have a younger Ryan Schimpf take over for Ryan Schimpf. Chris Owings is our new shortstop. The former D-back, he was with the Baltimore Orioles in 2019 and 2020 in this franchise. He was hurt for pretty much all of 2020. He only played like 4 games. And then he struggled with Baltimore in 2019, but he was good with Arizona in 2018. Chris Owings is a guy who I'm kind of taking a flyer on. I'm not the most sold on him, but he was really my only option at shortstop. There was another guy, which I will get into next, but he was really my only option at shortstop. And Torres is going to be in AAA for us, so that could change. Torres does have limit. He doesn't have any more minor league options left, so I do call him up. He'll have to go through waivers if I send him back down. But right now, it's Owings at shortstop, but it could always change. I could always mess around with things at that position. Cesar Hernandez was the guy who I wanted to give a shot at shortstop. He wanted $5.9 million because he's actually very good in this. I could have played him at leadoff for us. He's pretty good in the field. Not the strongest arm for shortstop, but I was willing to put up with that. But I would have lost the draft pick if I signed him because the Phillies qualifying offered him, and I did not end up signing him. He ended up going to the Pittsburgh Pirates. We did, in fact, sign a different Hernandez, though, as Kike Hernandez, another depth utility guy. He'll be in AAA for us as Gonzalez. Marwin Gonzalez is our major league utility guy, but if he gets hurt, Kike Hernandez would come up and take his place. Anthony Jimenez is a guy who we signed for 2 years, $1.2 million over those 2 years. He started last year about 100 games with Seattle in 2020 at a .713 OPS. Not the greatest year in the major leagues, but he raked in AAA in 2019 with Tacoma, I believe, is their AAA team. This is going to be a very nerdy thing that I do. At the end of every year, I go through the minor leagues and I look at AAA teams and I just look at the AAA league leaders and guys who have had good years, and I write them down in a Google Doc file because you can't actually go to their card and look at what the guys have done in the minor leagues. So I write these guys' stats down who I'm looking at on other organizations in a Google Doc. I had him in 2019 as a guy who I wanted to look at, and he just happened to be there in free agency this year, so I ended up going after him. And he could possibly have a spot on the team next season when Soler leaves, but as it stands right now, he is going to be in AAA for us. We also signed Dwayne Underwood to like a $580,000 deal. He's a fireball. He's had a few cups of coffee with the Cubs in 2018, 2019, and 2020. He's listed as a starting pitcher, but we're going to move him to relief pitcher, and he'll be a depth reliever for us, as he is a fireballer, and I don't really think he has the greatest skill set to be a starting pitcher. Now taking a look at some free agents who signed around the league. First thing we're going to do is take a look at Kyle Wren. Now you may be looking at Kyle Wren and going, what's so special about this guy? He was one of the top 3 hitters in the Detroit Tigers in 2020. I know that because all year long, essentially, it was Pavin Smith, It was Pavin Smith, Vince Falvey, and Kyle Wren, who were the three guys who were all battling it out for that Rookie of the Year spot in the American League. And the Detroit Tigers just pretty much said, nah, we don't need that 301, 364, 466 slash line 830 OPS. We don't want that on our team. We're just going to be even more aggressively mediocre because we don't want that guy. He is poor fielding. He does have poor fielding. That's a bit of an issue, but I mean, the guy hits. You can't just get rid of a guy like that who had a great season for you, but they did, and I'm pretty sure that he's still in free agency at the start of this season. I would sign him if I had room for him, but I really don't. So, once again, another issue with MLB The Show is franchise mode. Arizona was a team that was very active in free agency. They made 3 huge signings. The first one was they got Yoenis Cespedes. After that, they picked up Jacob deGrom to fill out some of their rotation, and then they also picked up Mike Moustakas. So Cespedes, deGrom, and Moustakas are all with the D-backs now. Toronto was another big team that had a huge offseason in its free agency-wise. Of course, they had R. Semien, and they also signed Jose Quintana, who won a World Series and the Cy Young with Chicago Cubs last year. They also picked up Masahiro Tanaka to improve the rotation. And then Jock Peterson came over to Toronto. Kevin Gausman did as well. And it is a good thing they signed Quintana and Tanaka because they did lose a couple starters, and as well as a bullpen guy. Roberto Ozuna, the AL reliever of the year, went to the San Francisco Giants. Aaron Sanchez went to the Cincinnati Reds, and then Marcus Stroman, the big one, went to the Baltimore Orioles. So not only did he leave the Blue Jays, he went to a division rival. So Stroman with Baltimore, but that's not all Baltimore did. They also went out and signed Mookie Betts. So Mookie Betts and Marcus Stroman, both beasts in the AL East, are now on a different AL East team together. So Mookie Betts on the Orioles as well as Marcus Stroman. That could make them a pretty decent team this year in a very tough AL East. The New York Mets were also pretty active in free agency, very surprising because they are the New York Mets after all. Shelby Miller came to the Mets in their rotation, Jake Lamb is going to be their third baseman this year, and Justin Bour from the Miami Marlins is now their first baseman, as I believe they did not bring back Duda. Francisco Cervelli is a very good player in this game. He has had very good seasons for the Pittsburgh Pirates. He had an .884 OPS with a .427 OBP last year with Pittsburgh, and he signed with the Houston Astros. So they improved that spot for them. I believe they had Maldonado last year, so now they have the guy who's good defensively and he can hit. So the Houston Astros just got even more stacked as a team. They did lose Ken Giles, though, as he went to the Washington Nationals. He's back in the NL East. Brad Hand went to Chicago Cubs. And Wade Davis went to the Philadelphia Phillies, the former Kansas City Royal reliever. Kyle Hendricks went to the Dodgers. So the Cubs lost Quintana and also Kyle Hendricks. Justin Wilson went to the Dodgers. And then the Colorado Rockies made a couple signings as well. Devin Betances is out there in Colorado. And Jackie Bradley Jr. is going to be patrolling center field for the Rockies in that gigantic outfield they have at Coors. Robbie Ray also went to the New York Yankees, so the Yankees made another decent signing. They weren't quite huge in free agency like they usually are, but they did make a decent signing with a starting pitcher in Robbie Ray to replace Masahiro Tanaka. We only made one trade this time around in the offseason. We traded starting pitching prospect, not really a prospect, he's like a late 20s guy who never really is going to get a shot for us, Trevor Oakes, to the Los Angeles Angels in return for 3 late 20s C potential prospects, just kind of fill out our organization and maybe provide some depth here and there. Hunter Moyer is the main one. He was a guy who slashed 309, 406, 468 in Salt Lake in 2020. He was a guy who I had my eye on. He was on that Google Doc that I was talking about earlier. And we also picked up utility guy who can play outfield as well as infield, Brendan Sanger, as well as a guy who can play all the infield positions in Sherman Johnson. Now taking a look at what our rotation, bullpen, and lineups are going to look like for the 2021 regular season to start things off on opening day. Our rotation 1 to 5 will be Chris Archer, Danny Duffy, Jake Junis, Foster Griffin, and Mark Leiter Jr. In the pen, it's Rafael Montero, Jose Torres, Sean Gilmartin, Jake Jewell, Brad Keller, Juris Familia, and Kelvin Herrera. I did not go with the 3 bench players this year and 1 extra relief pitcher. We removed a reliever, and we now have 4 bench players on our team. And now if we take a look at the lineups, our right-handed pitching lineup is third baseman Matt Carpenter, DH Falvey, right field Soler, left field Bonifacio, first base Smith, second base Schimpf, center field Phillips, shortstop Owings, and catching is Valoria. And then against lefties, it's a bit unconventional with Vince Falvey leading things off, but really don't have anybody else to lead off against lefties, so after him it is Soler in right, Bonifacio in left, first base Smith, Marte at third, Schimpf at second, Phillips at center field, Owing shortstop, and Valoria is catching. On the bench always, there is Marwin Gonzalez as our utility guy. Nick Deeney is our backup catcher this year as Audrey Perez. We still have him, but he's in AAA. Nick Deeney is a guy who's been in AAA Omaha for the past few years, and he has improved consistently every year in the minor leagues. He had a 7.49 OPS last year. He's actually got some wheels for a catcher, and he's got some pretty good attributes, so he's going to be Mabrys Valoria's backup this year, at least to start the year. And then our fourth outfielder is the one, the only Khalil Lee. Bit of a change from him. He changed his number from 9 to 1. Why did I do that? I don't know. I just felt like it. So Khalil Lee is now our fourth outfielder. And with that being said, that's pretty much going to wrap things up here for this edition of the Kansas City Royals franchise. The offseason recap, we are now heading into the 2021 regular season, and on opening day, it's going to be the Kansas City Royals travel out to Texas in Houston to take on the Astros. Chris Archer takes on Dallas Keuchel. I've been your host, Jerseyborn, and I'm saying goodbye.